Democrat officials continue turning away from Israel. As I mentioned just a few moments ago, earlier today, Senate Democrat leader Chuck Schumer took to the Senate floor to deliver an extremely pointed speech against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He even called for a special election to replace the prime minister. And this also comes while Secretary of State Antony Blinken continues putting pressure on Israel from the Biden administration for Israel to not invade Rafah, which is the last remaining stronghold of Hamas. As the president's poll numbers, quite frankly, continue to sag, is the Biden administration meddling in another country's affairs just for political gain here? Well, joining me now to discuss this is Congressman Randy Weber. He serves on the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, as well as the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. He represents the 14th Congressional District of Texas. Congressman Weber, always great to see you. Welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thank you, Jody. Good to be here.
All right, well, let's start with Chuck Schumer. I mean, here's the highest-ranking Jewish elected official in U.S. history, and he has consistently been on the right of his party when it comes to Israel. Where in the world did this speech come from today?
Well, probably shouldn't say this, but if you're going to describe him using the word rank, is probably not inappropriate in this particular time and juncture in the history. You're right. The highest rank, he can be pretty ranked with his comments. Highest ranking official in Jewish history, American history, calling for Israel elections to what? Depose Benjamin Netanyahu? What nerve and what short-sightedness. And I would even add, what stupidity, in case he's forgotten. Israel didn't invade the Hamas regime, other way around.
Yeah, it's incredible to me. You know, you have to look at all this and come to the conclusion this has nothing to do with Gaza, has nothing to do with anything other than political gain here at home. I just can't, from my perspective, wrap my brain around this with any other explanation. Your thoughts?
I mean, yeah, exactly. Let me highlight, and here's how I highlight that, Jody. So he's calling for regime change. Really? Our best ally? I wonder where he is on Iran. I wonder where he is on Russia, on China. How about Hezbollah? How about Hamas? And if I can be so bold, tongue-in-cheek to say, how about a regime change in the White House? This is ridiculous what they're doing to our best ally, Israel.
Yeah, it is stunning to me, which is what makes me think this is nothing more than politics. I mean, you look at how the president's doing in places like Minnesota and Michigan, where there are high populations of Muslims, and he is struggling in those states. It appears as though that might have a big factor with all of this. But, you know, we'll see. I'm sure time will unfold what really is going on here with some of that. But it's hard not to have those considerations. I know the president mentioned, and quite frankly, his staff try to back away from this, but the president mentioned talk of a red line over Israel invading Rafah, which, again, that is the last stronghold of Hamas. And, you know, why in the world would the president, when Israel has come this far to eliminating Hamas, why would the president say, don't go into this last stronghold to get them?
Well, election year number one, let me just repeat that, what he said. And don't miss this, folks. He threatens Netanyahu. He said if Netanyahu remains in power, we're going to have to take a more active role. The U.S. is going to have to take a more active role. And I'm like, as if that was even remotely possible. Think back, this Biden administration and take more active. How did that work in Afghanistan? Yeah, and I want to argue against something he said, that Netanyahu is fighting for his political survival. No, he's not. Benjamin Netanyahu is fighting for Israel's survival. You know, this is an existential threat to him. And so I just can't believe that Schumer would come out with something like this. But again, you pointed it out. It's an election year. I hope our Jewish friends around the country who normally might support Chuck Schumer might think twice about, or anybody, any Americans, anybody might think twice about supporting him.
Yeah, I can't help but think that the American people are seeing through this. Secretary of State Blinken has now come out with another, I guess, related argument to all of this, saying that civilians should be Israel's top concern, not eliminating Hamas, but civilians. That needs to be the top concern of Israel. And yet, as you just mentioned, Israel's there fighting for their own survival. They are trying to prevent massacres like happened on October 7th from happening again. What do you take of Secretary Blinken's comments that civilians should be the top concern?
He's got it completely backwards in one way, shape, form, and fashion. Obviously, civilians, but it's Israeli civilians that have to be held up and protected first and foremost. They've not made a practice on this, describing that they wanted to kill every member of Hamas or every Palestinian or anything like that. Hamas has been dead set on the annihilation of Israel and Israelis, civilians, since day one. And so the secretary needs to realize that, yeah, there are some civilians that have to be protected. Nobody wants ill on women and children in other countries or in other groups. But Israel has to do what's right to protect their civilians, their way of life, and absolutely annihilate Hamas so that they cannot return and attack and kill, mutilate, torture, rape, and burn Israeli civilians again.
Yeah, it's a great point. One thing before we move on from this that we have all seen from the very beginning, the international community refuses to blame Hamas for all of this, and they continue blaming Israel for all the fighting that's taking place in Gaza. It's concerning to me to see the United States seemingly now jumping in the wagon with the rest of the international community opposing Israel. Is that what's happening from your perspective?
Well, absolutely, Jody. When you see the majority leader of the Senate do what he did today and then question Netanyahu, saying Netanyahu's doing this for political survival when it actually is for the survival of Israel, you know, tongue in cheek, it's Schumer's political survival that ought to be called into question here. What him, Anthony Blinken, and everybody else ought to be doing is calling for the Palestinian to rise up and throw Hamas out. And that's what they should be calling. The fact that they're not laying the blame at the feet of Hamas and we don't want women and children killed, the Palestinian women and children killed. We don't. But Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, in my opinion, if Netanyahu is on the right track, they've got to go on there and eradicate every last Hamas terrorist they can find.
We're not going to have time to respond to this, but I want to show this last clip as we go out of this segment. Please play clip 5 real quickly.
He just said in the briefing that, and we've been saying it for months, that there is no restriction on the amount of food and water that are allowed to be delivered into the Gaza Strip. Full stop.
That was the spokesman for Prime Minister Netanyahu. They are providing aid. What we are seeing, the response from the United States goes far beyond reality. Congressman Randy Weber, thank you so much for joining us on Washington Watch. Always great to see you.